Hey guys, Sunday night school is in session. Ding, ding. We're going to go ahead and get started, and we're going to be in Romans chapter 10 this evening, or whenever you're watching this. Romans chapter 10, and I'm even going to give you time to get there because I found out you can pause a video. Ain't that crazy? So if you need to pause this to get there, go ahead and do that. But we're going to start reading in verse 4. All right, here we go. It says, "For Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes." For Moses writes about this righteousness that is based on the law, that the person who does the commands shall live by them. But the righteousness based on faith says, "Do not say in your heart, 'Who will ascend into heaven?' That is, to bring Christ down. And don't say, 'Who will descend into the abyss?' That is, to bring Christ up from the dead. But what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. That is, the word of faith that we proclaim." Verse 9, "Because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. For the scriptures say, 'Everyone who believes in him will not be put to shame, for there is no distinction between Jew or Greek or Gentile,' some translations say. For the same Lord is Lord of all, bestowing his riches on all who would call on him. And everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How then can they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless someone has been sent? As it is written, 'How beautiful are the feet of those who preach or bring good news.'" So the first question that we look at tonight is this: where had Paul's fellow Jews gone wrong? If we look back into the first couple of verses there, verses 4 and 5 specifically, where had Paul's fellow Jews gone wrong? They had gone wrong in the sense that they had thought that this salvation that you could obtain from God had to be earned. It had to be worked for. And that's just not the case. That's not the gospel at all. It says in verse, if we're going back to chapter 10, verse 4, it says, "Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes." Because we know that Christ, Jesus, had obeyed the law perfectly. Okay, every command he obeyed to the T. And so when our faith is in him, when our trust, belief is in him, then we get his righteousness. That's what that verse is saying. We don't have to work for it. We don't have to earn it. We should want to be good people. We should want to obey him by being good people, but we don't have to earn our salvation. Our belief and our faith is what saves us. That's where the Jews had gone wrong. They thought you had to earn it when all they really had to do was just believe, just have faith. The follow-up question to that is, in what ways are people today tempted to try and establish their own righteousness? In what ways are people today tempted to try and establish their own righteousness? I think a lot of people think that by giving, they can earn righteousness. They can be self-righteous. I think a lot of people think that just coming to church, just having their name checked in the attendance box is good enough, and that's going to earn them salvation. A lot of people think that just having a relative or just having a friend who's a Christian is enough influence, is enough to, get their daily Jesus. But that's not the case. That's where they're going wrong. It's great to give. It's great to be there. It's even better to have Christian friends and Christian family members. But those are not the things that save us. We cannot obtain salvation on our own. We cannot be self-righteous because that's not the gospel. That's not what Jesus teaches. We just need to be very careful with that. Next question. What was Paul's point in posing the questions found in verses 6 through 7? If you need to pause this and read those questions again, go ahead and do that now. But this gets really wordy. It gets really wordy right here and really confusing. But basically what Paul is saying is that we don't have to do any of the heavy lifting that Jesus had to do. Okay, we don't have to be perfect like Jesus was perfect. And we don't have to die a sinner's death like Jesus did. We don't have to do any of that because Jesus has done both of those. Again, all we have to do is have our faith and belief in Jesus. So Paul's point in all of this, he's just trying to simplify what salvation is. It's faith, it's belief, it's trust in Jesus. This theme just comes up over and over again. It's so simple, but yet we forget it so easily. And then the follow-up question to this is, how can people be saved? If you look in chapter 10, verses 9 and 10, it says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And then verse 10 expands and explains that verse a little bit further. But believing in the heart and confessing with the mouth, that's how you're saved. I mean, it is literally that simple. Like, we serve a God who made salvation as simple as he possibly could. Belief, confess, saved, done. That's pretty awesome. Okay, looking at verses 11 through 13, who is Jesus Lord of? And why do we need this reminder today? If you look back in those verses, you'll see that Jesus is Lord of everything. He's Lord of all. And so why do we need that kind of reminder? Because we easily forget. We think that we are the Lord of our life. We're in control. We obtain our own salvation. No, Jesus is Lord of your life, and he provides salvation for you. He is gracious that way. We just need that reminder. We need to know who's boss, is basically what we're talking about here. According to verse 13, who will be saved? Let's look at verse 13 again. According to verse 13, who will be saved? It says, for everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. So who can be saved? Everyone. That's super encouraging. Okay, so that's like saying terrorists can be saved. It means child molesters can be saved. It means murderers, thieves, gossips, liars. Anybody can be saved. That is such good news. We may not want them to be saved because of how bad they are, but think of the difference they could make if they changed their life. If they came to Jesus and changed their life around, and Jesus was able to penetrate their heart, soften their heart, and turn them into a godly kind of person, what effect could that person have? That's just something to put into perspective. That's just a different page that we need to turn and look at. And remember this too, not all Christians are going to look the same. Not all Christians are going to look the same. We're all saved the same way, by confessing and believing. And I've said this before, and I want to say this again, just because I think it carries so much meat to it. Just because somebody walks different than you do, that doesn't mean they're not following Jesus. They may be at a different faith level than you are. Okay, they may serve in a different ministry in the church. They may serve in a different capacity than you do. They may know more verses than you do. You may know more verses than they do. Anything like that. They may walk different, but they're still following Jesus. If they confess, if they believe, of course. Okay, last little bit. I'm going to go back to the very first question, the warm-up question for our Sunday school lesson. It says, what is one thing that you would really like to see happen this year? Duh. But besides the obvious, I would really love to see a baptism of a teenager, of a child, anybody 18 years old or younger. Nothing against 19-year-olds and older, but that's what I do. That's what I love to see. That's who I minister to. I would love to see somebody 18 years or younger baptized in our baptism pool. But there has to be something that comes before that. Before you're baptized, you have to confess, you have to believe. Before that happens, you have to come to church. You have to be witnessed to. We have to go out and invite them or go out and share with them. So I would love to see that whole process take place. So the last question that we talk about tonight, what does verse 14 tell us about the importance of sharing the good news about Jesus? Let's look back at verses 14 and 15. It says, how then can they call on him who they haven't believed in? And how can they believe in him of whom they've never heard? And how can they hear about someone unless someone is preaching to them? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? So I know that's, again, a really wordy, kind of statement. But why is this important? Because you have a job to do. You are the one being sent. You are the one preaching. You have two responsibilities in this passage that we just read. You're the one going, you're the one being sent, and you're the one preaching, you're the one teaching, you're the one sharing verses, you're the one sharing your testimony, you're the one inviting someone to church. The other two things, the believing and the calling on God's name, is up to the person you're sharing with. It's up to the person you've been sent to. You can't make those decisions for them. You can't force them to believe, and you can't force them to call on Jesus' name. We really wish we could do that, but that's not the gospel either. We have to believe that Jesus is going to do a work in their life. The Holy Spirit is going to soften that person's heart when we're sent and when we preach to them. But remember, anyone has the capability to be saved. Okay, the homeless people that you pass, the people that you pass in the hallways, the random people who comment and like your social media posts. Anyone has the potential to be saved, and God has sent you to them. Be confident in that. Hope you guys have a great night. See you soon.